Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Tools of the Trade, Modernizing for Efficiency in Manufacturing. My name is Macola, and I'm the editor for Pharmaceutical Processing, one of Advantage Business Media's manufacturing group publication. I'll be serving as the moderator for today's event. Now, before I begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Macola. I also want to encourage everyone in attendance to take advantage of the interactive nature of this webinar platform by submitting questions at any time during the presentation. This can be done by typing your question into the corresponding box on your screen, and we'll be saving all questions until the end of the presentation and attempt to answer them in the time allotted for the Q&A. Now to one of the reasons why you are all here. It's my pleasure to introduce Dan Griffin. Dan is the Director of Product Management and Product Marketing at Macola. Part of the senior leadership team, Dan guides the vision of the Exact Macola product line, oversees product marketing activities, and serves as one of the primary representatives of the Exact Macola brand. Prior to joining Exact in 2013, he spent the majority of his career at IBM, serving in both marketing and technical roles. Dan earned his MBA from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I would also like to introduce Dave Dozer. Dave is a senior product manager at Macola. With over a decade of experience in the IT and ERP industry, Dave has a background in hardware and networking, accounting and distribution, application development, quality assurance, and also has leadership experience. He has an in-depth knowledge of ERP solutions, CRM, HRM, supply chain management, accounting, and distribution. Last, I'd like to introduce Russ Lesko. Russ is the principal consultant for Macola. With over 25 years of experience in the operations, finance, and manufacturing industries, Russ is a results-oriented, hands-on professional manager. He has ERP sales and implementation experience, utilizing an extensive quality operations and business process management background in diversified business environments. Russ has a keen ability to identify needs, implement and re-engineer processes to improve and maintain a strong competitive advantage. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and I will turn it over to Dan.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll get into this and spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about modernization of the ERP system and how using a modern ERP system can help you with things like mobility in your business. So let's just go ahead and dive right in here. We're going to cover several things. The benefits of mobility, centralizing across multiple facilities, empowering your workforce, and putting your business at their fingertips. Of course, we'll cover a lot more as we get into the details, but those are sort of the key points that we want to highlight today. So let's just go straight into it here. When we talk about mobility, I think it's fairly obvious why we want to have a mobile option. You know, when you're getting a sandwich at the sandwich shop or standing in line somewhere, what are people doing, right? They're checking their smartphones and they're squeezing out that extra 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. They're checking in on something at the office. They're answering an email. And despite the fact that, you know, we've sort of lost our society in some ways to smartphones, at least from a work efficiency standpoint, we are gaining an extra hour of usage or an hour of work time each day because we're picking up 5 minutes here and there. And that, of course, is why just about every enterprise is using smartphones in some capacity for their business because it increases productivity, it adds more employee engagement, and ultimately that drives up profits and reduces expenses. So I like this idea of nostalgia is for cars and it's not for software. You know, I was at a car show recently and I was looking at a 65 Mustang, and this 65 Mustang, I kind of chuckled to myself, right? Because everybody loves a 1960-something Mustang. You know, they're really cool, and everybody has this nostalgia about these old cars. But when I read the stats or the specs for this car, I thought, you know, this car wouldn't stand a chance if it didn't have the nostalgia factor. Well, it's 101 horsepower, and meaning it goes 0 to 60 in 7.6 seconds. It's got single-speed wipers. The passenger seat didn't even adjust And certainly by today's standards, this is not a safe car. Now, 50 years later, or 51 years later, we have the 2015 or the 2016 Mustang. This is the GT that had 435 horsepower. It goes 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. Everything is power windows, power locks, power brakes, power seats, everything. And of course, from a safety perspective, you've got 8 airbags, anti-lock brakes, stability control, lane departure, everything that you can think of from a safety perspective is there. So nostalgia is great, but if you're objective, no one would argue that the modern car is the better vehicle from a specs and a utilization standpoint. So the funny thing to me is that sometimes people look at their software and they say the same thing. They say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or, we've been running this old software for 20 years. It does fine for us. And, that's very much like saying, well, I'm still driving my 1980 Chrysler LeBaron. Why would I upgrade to anything else without an acknowledgement of, what else could be out there? So what was once very advanced software isn't anymore, right? If you bought ERP software 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it's not unusual to keep ERP software 20 or 30 years, surely what you have lacks in flexibility. It lacks in mobility. It lacks in extensibility, the ability to extend it with other code. Likely you're having to enter data manually, so it's a very heavy manual data entry kind of thing. And certainly no one in the mid-90s was buying software with an eye to how does this work with my smartphone, right? Because smartphones didn't exist. Now, on the other hand, what might you get if you're looking at modern ERP software? Well, typically it's going to be something that's written in modern languages, and those modern languages are made for the web, made for mobile. They're made for being used with APIs and web services, that you can integrate data across multiple areas. And like I said, a lot of times that's with something like APIs. And there's a focus on usability. This idea that software doesn't have to be ugly. Software can be beautiful and pleasing to the eye at the same time being functional. And so this idea that software nowadays can be flexible, mobile, extensible, and really something that your users like and enjoy to use. Now, from a financial standpoint, there's a benefit that comes with that, which is if your employees like to use it, if it only takes a fraction of the time to get them trained, if they're not frustrated by it, that's going to save you time and money when you're implementing and using this software in your business. So I don't think that's not a difficult argument to make that it's worth the investment to go to modern software. Now, one of the things that we throw around in conversation a lot is this word mobile. And I wanted to point out that mobile or mobility is more than just smartphones for us. Mobility in your ERP system should mean any device, anywhere. So it's not just smartphones, but maybe it's web browsers on your laptop, maybe it's something on your tablet, maybe you're at the beach, but maybe you're at the coffee shop, maybe you're on the shop floor, maybe you're in different parts of your business and walking around with a tablet and needing to stay in touch with what's happening in your business. Maybe you need to interact and do transactional things. Maybe the screen resolution or the screen size of the tablet that you use at work is slightly different than the resolution of the one that you have at home. And the software needs to be smart enough to be responsive to the changing screen resolutions. So all of those things is just the norm for 2016 as we head into 2017 around mobility and multiple devices and bring your own device into the workplace. So what are some key benefits? Well, obviously, as we think about mobility and modern ERP software, some of the benefits are things like streamlining your operations. When you have software that's built from the ground up to communicate across the web, or to communicate with mobile devices, to communicate with things like web services, that's going to have a huge impact on how you streamline your operations, how you manage your key business functions. Does your software allow you to automate your key business functions? If so, that's a huge money saver right there, and it's an obvious productivity increase. So ultimately, all of these things add up to money saved, time saved, and as I like to tell my team, it's not just the time value of money, but it's the money value of time. So what's the money value of time when you save 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes across every day, or across every transaction, or across every order? The money value of that is it grows exponentially. So it's really staggering when you do the math there. Now, when you're taking your business mobile, and you want to think about what are some of the things in your business that might matter? Well, leaning on modern technology is certainly a key. You have to have modern technology before you can start to use modern phones and modern tablets, because as I mentioned earlier, you just can't put a piece of software from the 90s or the early 2000s and hold it to the same standards as something written in the last 5 or so years, because it was a completely different ballgame. So when we think about mobility, we want to first think about modern technology, modern languages, modern architecture. We want to think about making data instantly accessible. So how do you find the data you want quickly? Maybe you want it to be pushed to you instead of you having to find it. Let's set up alerts and have it pushed to your phone. Let's make user experience a priority. Again, when you're working off a 4-inch screen, user experience is even more of a priority than it is when you're on a 17-inch monitor on your laptop. So working on a 4-inch mobile screen, you need to be able to find what you need very quickly and very easily. And I think the most interesting thing here is that be selective. Let's start with an area where we can get a quick win in your business and not try to boil the ocean. If we try to come in and fix everything at once, it's a very risky and very expensive proposition. But instead, let's start with some select areas where we can automation, places we can implement mobility, and that's where you can really see some quick wins, some ROI, and then it's a business model that proves itself out. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Dozer and let Dave talk a little bit more about centralizing operations.
Great, thank you, Dan. So we kind of want to start building on, some of the principles that Dan was laying out there, talking about modern software and moving into sort of the next generation of applications and software. And at the end of the day, what that does and the modernization of ERP specifically, really create a framework and a baseline wherein you can start centralizing operations across multiple facilities, across multiple departments, because it's getting away from some of the verticalized and siloed type of operations that were just inherent, that were inherent back in the 80s and 90s and just inherent to software of that generation. So let's talk a little bit about really what needs to happen to be able to centralize operations in a modern world. So, one of the big problems that faces the non-centralized operations is that siloed info. So, and siloed info a lot of times is just through processes that have evolved over the years through different departments, and as attrition happens and, one department head kind of lays a process out one way, someone else comes in, does a little different, and then that information is ultimately trying to get thrown over from one fence to another. So, for instance, the HR team might be doing one thing one way, but that's not necessarily getting information to the technology team in a consistent and uniform fashion. So that's, things like that start to bleed into other areas, so to speak. So over time, it's generally not by design, but that information becomes more and more siloed as each department has certain needs that need to be met. So they sort of tweak operations, so to speak, and sort of with blinders on in some cases. And if the technology and the systems in place don't really facilitate the sharing of information across departments, then it makes it very easy for that siloing to happen. And then as you kind of look at the chart there on the right, and the info is everywhere, and again, that happens where maybe the shop floor is keeping some spreadsheets of things that only one guy has on his machine out in the back corner, and then the finance guys have some different spreadsheets, and then the sales team, they've got their own things going on, and maybe they're using another system, and then maybe then in accounting, then they're even using some of their homegrown things. So what happens is these systems kind of get built up, and they're not necessarily talking to each other, and then if they are talking to each other, it's sometimes not in a fully baked manner, and then what you end up with is a lot of duplication of efforts and a lot of running back and forth trying to figure out who's responsible for what, who has what information, why doesn't this information match, and then a lot of time and effort is spent, sometimes just chasing down very simple things because that data is not in one centralized place and is spread out between multiple departments and sometimes even in people's heads. So what are some of the big problems that arise from this non-centralization? And the key with the centralization of tasks and the accountability and automation that goes with that is that could be across facilities where one is in New York and one is in California. Or it could be as simple as, a department at the end of the hallway trying to communicate with another department, at the other end of the hallway. So it doesn't necessarily mean that separation by distance creates these sort of problems. It can just be separation by department or even just by activities. So one of the big issues is a lot of things get lost in translation from these disparate systems, and things fall through the cracks, so to speak. So, for instance, if you kind of look at the process flow on the left there, we're trying to take an item through the planning and creation phase. So we need to create the spec. It's going to need to go to someone in engineering to approve drawings. They're going to set up the bill of material. Then, finance is going to need to do some costing and maybe do a cost roll. And then finally, we're going to make that item active. Well, in kind of a legacy type system or a legacy type process, sometimes that might be done through email, where you're just sending a note to somebody, maybe even a paper sheet that's getting filled out or a spreadsheet, and that ends up sitting on someone's desk. So, one of the big challenges that try to solve with modern ERP type systems is automating a lot of those processes through workflow. And then holding folks accountable in each one of those steps so things aren't falling through the cracks. So you get away from this shrugging of shoulders and saying, well, it's not my job. Well, it was Bob's job to do that. Well, Bob's been on vacation for a week. So by standardizing those processes, that helps in that centralization, and also utilizing automated type workflows where everyone's accountable, it's transparent, and then anyone can see the status of any particular task at any given time. So what that really does is eliminate the barriers, of distance and time zones and things like that were challenges in the past, and make it easy, for data to transfer from one department or one person to the other without getting lost and the ball being dropped along the way. So the other big issue in kind of a legacy type system and not having any of this data kind of centralized is it leaves a lot of openings for process failures. So not just a task getting dropped, but something just totally exploding, so to speak, along the way. Because we're going to see a lot of delays as we try to get information from one person and department to another. And a lot of times there's confusion. surrounding these processes just because there's not a standard operating procedure. There's not a centralized system where those operating procedures can live, and everyone knows that 1, 2, 3, and 4 needs to happen in order for this process to be finished and then seen all the way through. And then this is even how a lot of times you'll end up with duplicate information, conflicting information around the same thing. A customer account, for instance, that's entered twice or even 3 times because we're keeping things in all these different systems. And then as you can see the chart there, that's just kind of an example of where over time some of these process flows that initially maybe were paper-driven, that would be 2 or 3 steps, over time balloon into these huge processes that we can't really keep a handle on. And before you know it, we're losing business because orders are not getting shipped on time. Customer complaints aren't getting followed up on. So things just start to spiral out of control, which ultimately results in lost revenue as well. So one of the big benefits of the centralization of operations, and again, we're talking about really sort of the process and the ability for folks, whether it be in a brick and mortar environment or employees that are spread out disparately across the country or even the continent or overseas even, by centralizing those processes and having a system in place where everyone can access that data. We can remove a lot of that confusion that happens, in sort of the old way of doing things. So this is kind of an example of that previous process that we saw on the last slide, where there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of questions as to who should do what, and really streamlining it down to where we're saying, okay, we're going to have a lead come in. What needs to happen to get that lead converted to a customer? To where they're placing an order, we're fulfilling the order, and everything's going through smoothly. And that just comes from organizationally laying out what that process should look like, in like a Visio chart, but then also having the tools within the application to facilitate managing that process all the way through from start to finish. So what we can essentially do is in the centralization of this, take order out of chaos and get to a nice, smooth, and most importantly, repeatable process as well. That we're not relying on a certain individual to know exactly how the whole process needs to work. They know how to do their section, and then if that person is out, the process is solid enough that anyone else can be dropped in essentially and finish through the rest of that process. So again, it's partially getting the processes aligned from a business standpoint, and then having the tool set available to standardize those and automate those all the way through. So kind of some parting thoughts around the centralization of those operations and the things that need to happen to get there. The number one thing is understanding what those processes are and what they need to be. So it's imperative that those sort of walls between departments or walls between processes be broken down and expanded so that there's a whole ecosystem essentially that's happening within the organization, and then everyone kind of from the top down understands what those processes are, and from there, you can start building out the support system for those particular processes. So what that also means is that it needs to be standardized. So whether you're East Coast, West Coast, sales department, finance, there's a standardization across the board that everyone understands, how to interact with the system, how to interact with those processes, and then that also makes onboarding and making changes to those processes much easier when there's sort of a baseline to work off of. And then, the devil is always in the details as well. So that's where it becomes very important to, within the application, within the system, to have the ability to capture all of the detailed information pertinent to a process so that we're not trying to create systems outside of that centralized area to store additional information and then make that information accessible to everyone, so everyone's always in the loop at every particular time. And then kind of as a final thought, once those processes are mapped out, understood, then it's always in your best interest to try to automate those, within the ERP system, and that's where you get the most value. And then it doesn't matter if there's buildings all across the states. It's centralized, it's easy, it's automated, and leads to quite a big uptick in efficiency. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Russ here and let him take the helm. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dave, and hello, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit more about empowering and enabling your workforce, your employees at every level in your organization through this approach called mobility. Mobility will be an enabler, and it's an enabler that's going to allow people to be able to gain those benefits that Dan and Dave have already spoken about. Just some examples of drivers. So these are some of the specific focus areas that, or specific needs that we consider drivers, towards of mobility, where mobility is most critical in today's kind of environment and the dynamics of most businesses. The first is CRM, customer relationship management, and probably there's no more important thing that needs access from anywhere than your relationship with your customer, the interactions with your customers, to be able to monitor everything going on related to your customers. These are abilities that you're going to be able to have either from a web browser or through a mobile device. So there are apps out there. We have apps out in the Google world and the Android and iOS world that support a CRM type of activity. And clear benefits for that is that you're never going to lose another piece of customer information. And you're always going to be able to access it from literally wherever you are. It can range from sitting at a coffee shop to sitting across a desk from one of your customers. You'll have information on different devices. You can see on that picture here. They also can range from a tablet or a smartphone using an app to a laptop-type computer using a browser. And this information will be consistent so that multiple people can see the same information. Another way in which those walls get broken down, silos get broken down through this. But it is always at one single place for the truth as it relates to your relationship with your customer, where anybody can go from any place using any type of device to be able to get that single source of the truth whenever it is needed. The other area of focus, or the other driver, is automation. Dave referred to that already, where items can be automated, notifications can be automated, the system and various tasks can be completely automated, so those tasks, those things that need your attention, can get your attention wherever you are, whenever it's needed. So the power of automation can range throughout the entire office, from inside and outside to the warehouse, to the manufacturing area, to the front office and so forth. All those sort of things help, again, to break down those types of walls that might exist between organizations. These alerts can be directed to you immediately, and they can be visible on a mobile device or a laptop, as we've seen already. These can be processes that require your attention, that require your approval. So if somebody needs something to buy and a purchase requisition type process is built into the system, then somebody in California could request something, and a manager who's traveling in the East Coast can then see it and immediately react to it and approve it, so nothing gets lost and nothing falls through the cracks with the mobile device. The third area is the concept of workspaces. And the workspace is a very personalized and actionable type user interface. It really is the looking glass into the complete ERP business software. They can be personalized to individual roles. They can be personalized to individual functions within an organization. Every level in an organization, every person within an organization can work from a workspace. It could look like a dashboard. It could look like a report. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is what type of information does a person want to see and be able to access, whether they are working from a desktop, a laptop, a mobile device. But they'll see only strictly the data that is important to them. It could range from a shipping schedule to a manufacturing order status workspace. So it can also be a very good cross-functional tool where you can have multiple functions kind of running around with these mobile devices looking at the same information, actually being able to communicate amongst themselves from that single information source, which would be accessible from the mobile device. But it's not just a report. It's not just a dashboard to look at. People can also take actions right on that workspace. So they can actually interact with the system itself, perform various interactions, perform various transactions, and so forth directly from the device that they're working from, whether it be a laptop or even a smartphone or tablet. The fourth driver is document management, and this is where documents can be uploaded into our system in many, many different ways, but they can be looked at in a real-time manner. So the document itself is controlled and protected within the system, and then they can be shared and they can be viewed by anyone from any of these devices that we've been talking about from a mobile standpoint. Obviously, the visibility that people will need by looking at documents, it could be special technical drawings that they need to access from different places at different times during the process. The documents can also be much more secured to where people don't have to make a hard copy of it, and perhaps that hard copy gets lost or picked up by the wrong person. It can all be controlled by way of online access to it, by way of the mobile device. And nobody really has to go to a document vault or any place like that to check out the document, walk to it, waste all that time. They can bring it up when they need it instantly from that device, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone. So the empowerment, the actual enabling capability of the workforce, people being able to actually now do things differently, be able to look at things differently, be able to run their processes differently, is obviously some of the key benefits from mobility. It's going to certainly improve customer service. Your customers will get the information they need or the action they need. It'll be happening a lot faster and more predictable for them. The productivity capabilities go without saying because of the mobility. People don't have to run to a computer terminal and log in to look up information or perform a task. They can literally perform it from wherever they physically are at any given time, whether they're even working or even in a non-work setting, such as a coffee shop or any sort of hotel room or anything. Sales activity, Dave talked a little bit about how that whole process of quote creations and quote completions and orders, entries, and so forth can all be done in a much more accelerated way because people are doing it quite literally on the run wherever they are at any given time. And then it also provides more visibility into the system itself, through the workspaces and through the reporting capabilities. You'll have instant access wherever you physically are to information that you need to be able to manage and measure the business. So with that, I'm going to switch over now to back to Dave and Dan to talk a little bit more about putting your entire business at your employees' fingertips.
All right. Thank you, Russ. I appreciate that. We're coming towards the end here, and we want to just give you a quick overview of what the Macola system is about and what types of things you with a Macola system. We like to think of it as being divided into 7 key parts. Certainly manufacturing and distribution are our strengths, and so I like to say if you're making or selling anything, then you're a good candidate for Macola. But also we handle project management, we handle quality management. Certainly accounting and finance has a big piece of running. Also HRM, that's your human resources management, and your CRM, which is your customer relationship management. So those are the 7 pieces that are part of Macola. And one of the things that makes Macola different is that these 7 pieces are part of our all-you-can-eat inclusive package. We don't have a pricing model where you buy something and then you add more and add more and add more. The way that Macola is packaged is that when you buy Macola, you get all 7 of these pieces. So I feel like that is a differentiator for us and something that our customers have enjoyed the benefits of. When we think about where the advantages are for running an ERP system like what we've been talking about, it crosses over the boundaries. It's not just the shop floor, it's several places. So certainly when you're on the shop floor, what are the things that you care about? You care about visibility into your manufacturing activities. Maybe you care about production or supply chain or your purchasing. All those are things that you care about on the shop floor. But again, it's more than that, right? Your sales and marketing team, they're interested in your CRM space. They're interested in document management and automation. And maybe they want notification of going to account managers when proposals get turned into orders. Or maybe they want to automatically send out invoices and order confirmations to the customers when orders are placed. So sales and marketing cares about your ERP system. And certainly the C-suite cares about your ERP system. So, what are the high-level reports that your CEO and CIO and CTO, what is it that they want to see at a high level? How can we create those reports automatically and have them served up to your executives? So financials, inventory turns, general health of the business. Let's take those daily and weekly reports on those on the KPIs, and let's make sure that they're in the hands and on the dashboard for your executives. So that is the presentation that we wanted to talk about here today. We've talked about mobility and centralizing across multiple facilities and putting the business at your employees' fingertips and really giving them the power through both smartphones, tablets, browsers, and being anywhere and accessing your data. I think that's the key thing here is the data is not location dependent. The data goes where you go, and you can get that information that you need at your fingertips. So I believe this is where we're going to turn it over for some Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Dan, Dave, and Russ for your presentations here. So we will now shift to the Q&A portion of today's discussion. If you haven't already, please feel free to submit any questions that you may have, and we will address them at this time. Our first question is, what size business can use and afford ERP like the ones presented? What is the percent of successful ERP implementation for SMEs?
I'll take that one here. Like I was just saying a second ago, I think one of the key differentiators for Macola is so all those pieces that we talked about, those 7 pieces, come out of the box. And so for a small business, that's a huge win, right? So if you're let's say 5 or 7 or 8 person small business, if you have to buy modules one by one or add those modules on one by one, depending on which company you're dealing with, very quickly that system becomes a system that is an extreme financial burden on your company. And so we've packaged ours differently, and is small business. And so we still have the opportunity to talk about that. As for the percentage of implementations, we've got a fantastic track record of implementing across many, many thousands of companies. We've been around for 40 years, and so we can put you in touch with success stories. All those things, we have a fantastic track record of implementation.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, in order to implement the system, shall we need to implement barcode on our production processes, and what do you suggest?
Do you want to grab that one, Russ?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that one. I think you can gain a lot from mobility without having to invest in barcode scanning. Now, of course, the technologies of handheld, smartphone-type scanning devices that do scanning of inventory, that's kind of an emerging type technology. But I would not say that barcode technology is a prerequisite to be able to gain the benefits that we've discussed with regards to mobility. Dave, you can add to that if you have anything.
No, I think that really kind of hits the nail on the head. It's definitely an efficiency and adds a lot of opportunity, but it can also be, if you've never barcoded or used any sort of WMS system at all in the past, it can be a large undertaking. There's definitely a lot of efficiencies that can be gained even on the inventory management and warehouse management side of things without necessarily having to go to a full WMS type of system.
Great, thank you. So our next question, will it provide support in the preparation of export documents and the material shipped to our global system, and the whole supply chain will be synchronized?
I'll kind of jump in on this one, guys. So the short answer to that is absolutely, because of the way the data is centralized in one area. Any sort of international documentation, shipping documentation, labels, those sort of things can all be generated out of the system. And then through that, you can really streamline the supply chain operations all the way from sourcing to the actual purchasing, to the planning for that purchasing, through to to the payable side even, and getting into and statistics around quality and on-time delivery. So then, again, that's one of those areas where that can be decentralized and brought into one area, and a lot of that automated where it might be happening outside of the system today.
Thank you. Next question. Again, every system has everything Russ is talking about. What are the competitive advantages of the other modern systems I receive emails about all the time?
So I'll start this one off, and then maybe Dan and Russ, if you guys want to jump in as well. So, yeah, to that point, we're all getting emails all the time about mobility and mobile apps and all the great things that the ERP systems are doing today. One of the big issues I think with some of that though is a lot of times those are sort of disparate pieces that are, I don't want to say bolt on, but they're kind of perform an auxiliary function. They maybe do half of what you would expect traditional ERP to do, or it's packaged in such a way that you think you're getting one thing, but then need to buy another 7, 8, 9, 10 modules in order to get all of that functionality. And even then, that's still sort of siloed in such a way that even those modules are having to communicate together. So one of the big things is having a system that has that core really ERP type functionality. So the finance, distribution, manufacturing, those really those pieces that are really business critical to anyone in those industries, but then also integrated with that and just part of that system, the document management pieces, workflow, the mobility that's talking directly to that data. So again, it's important to have those walls broken down, and that's not something that's always clearly communicated, with other ERP type of systems. So, Dan, Russ, if you guys wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add my 2 cents. First, sounding like a broken record, I do think that one of the things that we offer that no one else does, at least not to my knowledge, is that all-inclusive packaging. So I think that's the first on my list. Second, I would echo what you said, Dave, which is this idea that all of it works together end to end. Your document that's saved in document management can also be accessed other places in the system. It all ties together, and it's one cohesive system. Thirdly, I would go back to what we talked about a little bit earlier on about when you build the system around web services, that gives you extreme flexibility to modify the system, to talk with external services or have external services talk with your system, and of course the ability to build custom on top of web services is tremendously easier than trying to go into the muckety-muck of the code and do some kind of custom work. So I think those 3 are pretty key for me.
And I would just add one point to add to what Dave and Dan just mentioned is that I talked about our Workspace technology, and that does something I think is quite unique because it basically takes the user experience that the user has to live through every day and puts it in the hands of the user to be able to define it. It's not dictated by the software or by the app or by anything, like many other systems have it. So I think that just our ability to be able to have that user experience, whether it's at a desktop level or a laptop level or even a smartphone level, to be very configurable by the user themselves and allows that to allow much more of a natural type of experience for anyone using the system from any device.
Great, thank you. So our next question, this is directed to Russ. Are there issues that mobile devices aren't well suited to address? If so, please explain.
Really not. I think the only thing that comes to mind is that if you have a particular kind of manufacturing environment that might be very heavy types of manufacturing with a lot of poor polluted air and so forth, and vats of chemicals or something like that, then somebody doing a transaction or interaction from a smartphone, hanging over that vat may not be such a good idea. A lot of people still can use mobile devices, but sometimes they would maybe encase them in like a little kiosk of some sort and essentially use a tablet more than something like a smartphone. So I think really just the smartphone has its own natural kind of limits in terms of what you're doing in a certain place, and are you liable to put it down, or is it liable to slip out of your hands, things of that nature, I would always be conscious of.
Thank you. Okay, and our next question is regarding cloud versus on-premise. I'm going to direct this to the whole team.
I'll answer that one, or at least start if anybody else wants to jump in. So, we get this question a lot around how we handle cloud. Are we true cloud? Are we SaaS? Those kind of things. Are we on-prem? And the answer is it depends on what the customer needs and what they want. A lot of manufacturers do want something that's inside their walls, and that's still probably the majority of our business is on premises. The next group says, hey, I want to get out of the IT business. I want to have my software in the cloud. And so we don't have a pure SaaS solution. What we do is we partner with cloud providers like Amazon and Azure, and we can host our software in in a cloud like that, and it's just like it were running down the hallway, but instead it's running in the cloud. And so when you use those kind of implementations, the software is fairly agnostic. It doesn't know that it's in the cloud. It just knows it's running on a server. And so that's how we handle that for customers. I know that we have customers that are doing that very successfully. Russ, Dave, do one of you guys want to add anything in there based on your customer experiences?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on, the way you laid it out there, Dan. A good base of our customers are still on-prem and kind of prefer an on-prem solution. But like you said, a lot are moving away from that. As an organization, we've been very transparent about, not necessarily having a true SaaS type of solution, where I think some folks maybe always sort of blur the lines with that a little bit. Our big focus is around mobility and accessibility, and having that access via web interface and being able to open that up, without moving all the way into that sort of multi-tenant type of environment where you lose control of your own data. And, if you're not making that monthly, if you miss a monthly payment or decide you want to switch to another system, then, you're shut off and your data is not really your data anymore. So, we like to be very clear and upfront that, hosted is cloud, and it's just really sort of where the hardware is and how you're accessing that.
I'll just add to that, and the way that we've positioned our product is very key as well because of how people really want to secure their data. A lot of people get into discussions about cloud, but they really want their data to be a lot closer to them. They want it more secure and so forth. So I think our solutions, other than the pure SaaS type of solution, has consistently met what people are looking to achieve. They don't want to have a major IT staff having to manage the on-premise solution, but at the same respect, they also want their data to be very protected and secured.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question is the solution solely cloud-based, and what is the average implementation time of the solution?
Well, I think that we just answered the first part of that. It can be on-prem or it can be hosted. The average implementation time, it really depends on the complexity of what the customer wants to do. Dave, you've probably been involved in more implementations than anyone on this call. What would you say is shortest and then maybe normal?
Yeah, it can vary pretty dramatically based on number of users, size, and scope of the implementation. Because our application does span a lot of areas, a lot of modules, a lot of functionality. So depending on how much of that you want to implement up front can impact the time frame, as well as if you're using that as an opportunity to go ahead and centralize those activities and kind of step back and take a look at your own internal processes. But I've seen it take anywhere from, for a smaller user count that's coming off of maybe no system or a very smaller system where you're up and running in 2 to 3 weeks. And I've seen it take as long as a year for, a very long type of process. But I would say on average for, kind of the mid-size organization, it's probably about a 3 to 4 month process to get everything up and running how you want it to, get everyone trained, and get them ready to go live with the software.
Great, thank you. We are gearing down now to the last few questions, so I'm going to address Dan for this next one. At what point do older technologies become too outdated and new technologies need to be implemented? In other words, what are some of the key signs to look for to know these technologies are outdated and need to be replaced?
That's a good question. We go back to our car analogy that we had at the beginning and bring it back to cars, and you say, when do you know it's the right time to get rid of the old car that you've had for 15 years? And there really is no exact time where it just says, on this date we're going to switch over. It's just things that start to happen, right? When you start to find that you're doing everything with workarounds or everything with customizations, when the system that you have doesn't have the framework to interact with the other business tools that you're using in your business. So like if you say, well, hey, we want to buy this business intelligence tool because we need to have this kind of data through business intelligence, and the ERP system that you're running doesn't know how to talk to a business intelligence tool, that's just one more sort of poke in the eye. Wow, maybe it's time for us to go to a modern ERP system. So I think it just adds up over time, and every business has to make that decision for themselves. But at a certain point, the pain is no longer worth staying on the system that you're on. And so, part of what we've tried to do through this webinar and others that we've done is paint the picture of where we can take it, and just give people a bit of an idea of what that modern system might look like, so they have an idea of, oh, if I upgrade, then a lot of these pains go away, or oh, if I go to a modern system, then these 5 out of my 7 pains are alleviated. So it's really, and it's an individual decision, but it's more about assessing the pains that you currently have and identifying them and being able to say, oh, that's something that I could do much better, cheaper, faster, automated, whatever it may be.
Great, thank you. And this is our last question for today. This is going to be directed toward Dave. What are the first steps a company should take towards centralizing operations?
Well, the important thing and the first steps really sort of begin on paper or in a conference room, so to speak, and that's really getting the key stakeholders in all of those processes together in one room, and really hashing out what organizationally what you want those processes to look like, and how that information needs to flow within your organization, and whiteboard all that out. And really before anything happens systemically in that centralization process, you really want to have a good handle on, for your business, how those processes should flow, and then that makes it so much easier to translate that into the automation and workflow tools, rather than trying to kind of hash that out systemically on the fly, and really just mapping that out and trying to get buy-in from everyone from a management level, and ultimately down to the folks that are putting the data in. That's really key before you really start hammering it out in the system.
Great, thank you. So thank you again to Dan, Dave, and Russ for your time today, as well as our sponsor, Macola. If you'd like to take another look at the webinar or share it with a colleague, it will be available for on-demand viewing at farmpro.com starting tomorrow. And that concludes today's presentation. So thanks so much to everyone for attending, and have a great day.